So, Royal Blood. I've not really gotten a chance to talk about these guys. Their debut album came out in 2014, a year before I started doing music reviews, and it's taken them 3 years to make a follow-up. For those who don't know, Royal Blood are a duo that, similar to bands like Queens of the Stone Age, blend elements of hard rock, blues rock, and stoner rock together to create a very dirty, however exciting and in-your-face sound. Their debut self-titled album is honestly one of my favourite debut albums of the past decade. It is far from original, but what it lacks in originality it makes up for in pure vigour and fantastic instrumentation. The band are 2 guys, one on drums and the other on bass. Using a wide array of pedals and multiple amps, the bassist and frontman Mike Kerr creates a sound that could be mistaken for a guitar if you didn't know it was a bass. It's a fascinating and fantastic sound, even if it may just kind of be Death from Above 1979, but less punk and dance centric. Their first album was an excellent and stripped back album that took things back to basics. It doesn't have any super experimental and unique songwriting in it, it just sticks to the classic rock formula that bands like Led Zeppelin and even Black Sabbath followed years prior. Their debut album was huge, debuting at #1 in the UK charts and being the quickest selling debut album from any rock artist in 3 years. And that is because the album and band called back to a time where rock was exciting yet simple. I was lucky enough to see the band at an intimate warm-up show for their arena tour earlier this year, and I think it's the only time I've ever seen such a huge mixture of people of all ages in the crowd. You had all the young kids who got into it because they're quite an accessible rock band, you had the people in their mid to late 20s who grew up with bands like Queens of the Stone Age and Foo Fighters in the early 2000s, and you even had the much older people in their 40s, possibly even 50s, who came in their Black Sabbath t-shirts, obviously a huge fan of 70s and 80s hard rock bands. Royal Blood filled a void for rock in mainstream music, and 3 years later they returned with their follow-up How Did We Get So Dark, which once again reached #1 in the charts just this week. How is it? It's alright, that's about it really. It isn't as good as the first album, but at the same time it's not terrible. There are some fantastic songs on there, but they're sandwiched between a lot of filler. I was hoping that it was just my hype for the album clouding my opinion and that I only wasn't a big fan because it wasn't what I was expecting, but I've listened to it about 5 or 6 times now, and I've tried to be very open-minded to the non-single tracks, and my opinion since I first heard it the first time is the exact same as it is now. I like 7 of the album's 10 tracks, and the other 3 are forgettable and bland. Making a follow-up to a critically acclaimed, massively successful album is a very tough thing to do, and that's why a lot of bands are known to have that second album rut. With most bands, it seems like their second album is either their best or their worst, and sadly at the moment Royal Blood have fallen into the latter of the two. But that's not to say this album is a write-off completely. The first single from the album, Lights Out, is one of the band's best. It's a perfect representation of this album at its best. The album is much more polished and less gritty and raw than the previous album. The first album was recorded in mostly first takes and was only vocals, bass and drums with no correction, no synths, nothing. This album feels tighter and also at some points better produced with synth and piano sounds brought into the mix also. Lights Out is exactly what you'd expect from Royal Blood, but more mature and perfected than their first album. And this carried on to one of my favourites from the album, Hook, Line and Sinker. From the opening line, she's got the devil on one shoulder and the other's getting colder, you kind of know exactly what to expect from the track. A track full of the band's signature use of similes and metaphors. Lyrically, I think this is one of the tracks that succeeds the best, mostly because most of the album is lyrically pretty terrible. The instrumentation on this track is very rough, exciting and brash, and that solo is fantastic. The track as a whole gives me very strong Queens of the Stone Age vibes, especially their more recognisable songs like No One Knows and Little Sister. This is a song that has been a regular at the band shows over the past couple years, and I definitely think they did a good job of recording it for the album instead of leaving it to fade over time like Guns N' Roses did with many of the songs they played live that they were writing from Chinese Democracy. Another older song on the album is Where Are You Now, a track originally recorded and released for the vinyl soundtrack back in 2015. I really like this song and have done since its original release. To see it re-recorded on this new album was really great, and honestly, this new recording is perfect. I wasn't sure how it would sound, but somehow it actually does sound a lot better than the original. The track has these really great bass sounds which I honestly do not understand how they were possible. The track is very bouncy, epic, and one of the hugest tracks on the album. If there's one song on this album that I think will translate to their arena shows perfectly, it is this one. It's catchy and incredibly fun. The most recent single from the album is I Only Lie When I Love You. A track, although I was a big fan of at first, kind of gets very boring and repetitive over time. It's kind of representative of this album at its worst. They kind of lose the balance of fantastic and memorable riffs and really solid songwriting and focus more on the songwriting side. And even that they don't do too great. The instrumentation on this track doesn't really stand out quite the way that other tracks by the band do. The band have never been super original, but when they're at their best, you kind of forget about that because they make things so exciting and fun that it feels fresh and unlike any of the huge amount of blues rock duos over the past decade or so. But with tracks like this, they don't do anything exciting and it just makes them kind of fade away with the other bands in the genre. And that's probably my biggest problem with the album in general, to be honest. Although tracks like Lights Out, She's Creeping, Where Are You Now, Hook, Line and Sinker and Hole in Your Heart do stuff differently or at least are so exciting and fun that you ignore that, the rest of the album has nothing. Although the first album followed the basic rock formula, it did it in a way that kept things very epic and exciting. The filler tracks here are just so underwhelming and boring that it kind of ruins the rest of the album for me. I don't normally talk about deluxe editions of albums, but with the Super Deluxe edition you actually get 2 bonus tracks on a 7-inch vinyl. And honestly, these 2 tracks are fantastic and could have easily been placed on the album in favour of songs like Look Like You Now and the absolute snooze fest known as Don't Tell. But overall the album really seems to kind of lack the oomph and exciting sound of that first album. I know there's only so much they can do with a drum and bass duo, but I definitely think they could have done much better than this. Even if they spent a little longer in the studio and experimented a little bit more, they could have created something much more exciting and memorable than this album. And it's a big shame, because this was one of my most anticipated albums of the year, but it sadly just doesn't reach the bar set by its predecessor. Although it has some really good songs, it's clouded by the filler tracks that have nothing to distinguish them at all. So I give How Did We Get So Dark by Royal Blood 7 out of 10.